We're continuing strong. I love how every year we have some speakers returning. Andrew is one of them, and I find out something new about him each year. This year, he just told me that one of his first job was actually in a women's wear in a fashion company that ended up in court. So I would like to hear more more about that story. After that, he transitioned to software, which he says is a lot easier than women's fashion wear. He owned a company, he exited, and then led marketing at Optimizely. Now he's the CMO at Paddle. So please welcome to the stage, Andrew.
Anthony, I need a oh, there we go. Wonderful. Fantastic. Well, firstly, I apologize profusely for bringing the weather from the UK. Sorry. Imogen, that was great. It brought back heart palpitations from our own exit process in 2019. My name's Andrew. I have the privilege of serving about 6,000 software companies around the world through my role at CMO at Paddle. And over the last few weeks in preparation, I've just tried to pull together some data and some examples of the conversations that I'm having with our customers at the moment, particularly with this frame of reference. The age of AI, how are people growing? And so we're going to just walk through 7 different topics. Hopefully, 1 or 2 of them are useful to you. The aim of us doing this is to try and spark attention. Maybe there's one of them that you can take home and implement and help you grow faster. So we often start off with some kind of macro. This is our data set that hasn't yet been updated for Q1, but was right at the end of Q4. We're seeing real stabilization in the industry now, but averages are absolute bullshit because the market is bifurcated. There are some companies that are growing very, very fast and some companies that are really struggling in today's market. And if we split the macro that we see, and we see about $1.4 billion going through our platform, about 6,000 customers, but we also have a metrics product where we see about 19,000 software and subscription companies processing about 30 billion of ARR going through. So it's a reasonable look at the industry. And what we do find is there's a whole bunch of businesses that are incumbents now, built on old principles, 50 million ARR plus. Many of us could name them. We often use them in our stacks, and they're really, really struggling. And then we see AI native businesses, and this category of the under 1 million ARR are growing 93% faster than when we did this study a year before. So there's some real growth at the bottom end, which I think is showing some real signs of life. And then if we dig deeper, we're all hearing these great stories about outlier growth, the lovables and the cursors and the bolts. It's really interesting. There's a couple of things that are happening. Firstly, massive distribution is being built into the heart of these products. And we saw Cursor go to 100 million revenue in 12 months. Can we just stop and think about that? 100 million revenue in 12 months. Monstrous. And then we look at the efficiency of these businesses. It used to be the case that you needed 500 people to get to that 100 million mark. And then when we got into the age of PLG, some of the companies that we still use today, like Slack and Calendly, they might have taken 150 people, 300 people to get to that 100 million mark. And now businesses are getting into it, this AI-powered product category here, and they're getting to 100 million revenue in under 100 staff. Again, mind-blowing. It used to be that ARR per FTE, ARR per person, a really good metric as you started to scale would be between $200,000 and $400,000 per person. And now, many of these companies are operating at $500, $700, $1 million per person. Absolute mind-blowing. And it's really fascinating to look across our customer base. I'll give a couple of examples of these, of businesses that are doing $750 or $1 million per employee in their business. So not only are they at the very outlier end, and probably there's not many of us in this room who have got on this pace of growth, not only are they growing very fast, but they're also growing very, very efficiently. But when you dig under these stories, it's really important to understand what's going on. So let's take Lovable as an example. Out of Sweden, went to 17 million ARR in its first 3 or 4 months of operation. But that was only on its third launch before it actually saw that traction. And if we go back and look at it, it was originally called GPT Engineer, and it launched, and it was kind of giving you this idea of creating text to build an app. And there was a bit of buzz around it 6 months before it retried again. And launched again, and they fixed a whole bunch of the bugs in it, but then people were finding after building slightly more complicated apps the AI was stalling out and it was really failing. And so they went back into their cave again and started building. And you can see all the way through September, October, November, people trying it, but no one sticking. And then they realized that actually what was holding them back was that people had been trying this and they were burnt on the past experience of what it was called. And so they rebranded. They believed that they then had a lovable product that was creating lovable apps. And honestly, if you chat to the team there, they all, half of them thought this was an awful idea to rebrand as lovable. Like, that would fix everything. But what it did is it created a reset moment in everybody's mind of now testing this new thing. They had to tell everyone it was new so that they could actually go and get a whole bed of new testers. And then suddenly, this thing has started taking off. And there's a couple of things to learn about this. Firstly, across our entire base, we see a confusion of trying with buying. It used to be the case that when you had pretty stable metrics within your onboarding, whereas right now, many people in this room, we will be trying new tools, 4 or 5 of them in parallel. Maybe it's $5 a month, $20 a month, but we're trying 4 or 5 vendors that are going against each other, and then we'll churn out of maybe all of them, or maybe 4 out of the 5. And so you have to be really careful with your onboarding metrics. Do you really believe you're growing, or do you just have a whole bunch of people that are trying? And so you can't trust some of your older LTV calcs, your older metrics, because it probably isn't the same. The behavior, the fundamental behavior of consumers, prosumers, and people testing SMB SaaS is just different now. And then building is different. And everyone in this room knows this much better than I do. Many of you have got a more technical slant than I do. I think it's fascinating that of the last cohort at Y Combinator, 25% of the startups have 95% of their code base generated by AI. 25% of Google's code is now AI generated in their last earnings call. 97% of developers through the GitHub study are using AI tools. We're building faster, right? And another thing that if we step back and think about the age of what's happening now, if we just plot some of the big innovations, the browser, social web, the App Store as a distribution platform in everyone's pocket, cloud as a mechanism for then bringing on-premise to the masses on a consumption model, and then Gen AI. One of the things that happens in any of these breakthrough technological curves is that there's a real breakthrough of consumer innovation. And if you dive into Bessemer's cloud report, I think it's one of the best ways of looking at what's going on in SaaS. They dive through and they say that we have not seen a major cloud exit in the consumer space for 5 years. Because there just hasn't been that much innovation since those early, the Amazon Web Services and the social web and the App Store. There hasn't been that much platform-level innovation. And so a lot of the companies we've been building have been B2B businesses, or businesses with a pure enterprise focus. But something's really fascinating now. As we've got this new wave of innovation, we've got Gen AI LLMs to build on top of, there are a huge number of consumerized enterprise businesses or businesses that serve the individual before the overall organization, which is really fascinating. And so with this breakthrough, we're seeing not just a change in how people build, but what people build. We've been talking about consumerization of IT for 20 years, right? But this is on steroids now. We're able to build insane functionality that can serve an individual user at an extremely low cost so that they can truly get that value before we go up into team plans. And just to click one bit deeper into what the opportunity is here, when I look across our base, yes, many people are building copilots. Many people are thinking about how they use agentic AI to replace teams, replace people within their organization. But there's also something that is fascinating to me, which is the services industry. Because we all have people that might be augmented with AI. We've all got some forms of workflow that could be replaced by agentic AI. But there's a whole bunch of service providers, accountants and finance advisors and admin back office stuff that actually is being attacked as well. And if we look at the actual GDP of the US as a proxy here, software is only 1%, but professional and business services are 13% of the US economy. So there's a 10x opportunity, not just for AI to attack what we've all been in software, but for AI to attack services. And that's where we're seeing a lot of innovation with people automating parts of those functions that were back office or outsourced. So in this room today, we've probably got a bunch of categories of people. And I know certainly I speak to some who are very much in the weary category, perhaps receiving text messages like this one. And there's some people who are in the wired category, who are just desperate to get on with it, who want to build and break and find and do. And I'm not going to ask people to raise their hands, particularly if you're sitting with your colleagues right now. But there are some very weary people in the market. So with that little context, we're going to dive into 7 quick things that I think are setting apart the customers that we have, that we serve, that are growing significantly beyond that average. The first one, maybe it's a truism, we've been saying it for a while, but we really believe that distribution is the new battleground. If we look at VC spend at the early stage, it used to be 5 years ago that about 70% of that would go on product and engineering, and 30% of that would go on go-to-market. And that's flipped. What we're seeing now is that actually 30% is going on the build, and 70% is going into how we get this to the market, how we distribute. And distribution is built into the very core of the products we're building. And this is important because everyone in this room is probably facing more competition than we've ever faced before. We find it amazing when we see people start on Paddle and launch, and often we'll see them in batches, 4 or 5 or 10 or 30 people in exactly the same category, attacking the same type of problem from different parts of the world with maybe a different angle or approach. And that's really tough, right? Because suddenly the battleground isn't the bit of capability that you're building, although some of that is very differentiated. It's how you bring it to market fast. And as the old saying goes, I'd much rather an average product with an insane distribution strategy than an insane product with a very average distribution strategy. So there's 3 things that I'm finding the marketers and the heads of sales that I'm talking to that stand out. Really being with your customer, and we'll talk about that in a bit more depth, executing with real courage, and then engineering your go-to-market alpha, your thing that finance professionals talk about, the alpha, the ability to get ahead of the market. Let's talk about be your customer. One of the reasons I joined Paddle 3 years ago, I was a software founder, was exited, had 2 years after we sold it to work at the acquirer. And one of the reasons I chose Paddle, it wasn't the only one, was that I was marketing and selling back to the persona that I was. I'd been a founder of a software business, and now I was selling, encouraging, helping software founders grow. And I found that really exciting. I found it highly resonant. Some of my network was able to be beneficial in that regard. And I'm also now finding that hiring founders as marketers is part of the strategy we're running because there's resonance with that space. And I'm seeing this in other industries too, in other customers we serve, where they're not just looking for founder market fit, but marketer market fit. Runner's a great example of this. They're a Paddle customer. Runner have just been acquired by Strava. It's a UK-based mobile app that helps people go on their runs and get fit and healthy. Passionate team. The vast majority of that team are active runners. And the 2 founders, active runners. They're in the community. They don't need to go on some go-to-market model and build some machine to contact people who feel a bit alien to them. They are their customer. So they can be the ambassadors. They know the market, and they can incentivize influencers around them. And they created this real bow wave of attention through their own storytelling, their team storytelling, and the influencers they worked with. So this idea of really being your customer is something that we're seeing happen time and time again. There's a friend of mine who owns multiple care homes in the UK. And there's lots of people looking at AI for elderly and AI for end-of-life care. But I know that someone like him who actually has 4 or 5 care homes that he can go and try this stuff in immediately and how the feedback loop is really small, he's going to have a chance of winning beyond a team sitting in a disconnected room trying to learn about that market and then sell into care homes. He is the customer. So, secondly, execute with courage. I put this photo up because I wanted to shout out Udi. I love what Gong have done over the last few years. It's a good book. I'm not just saying that because he covers some of Paddle's marketing in it, but do grab it. It's called Courageous Marketing. I truly believe that mediocrity is the most competitive space we can operate in. And our job in go-to-market is to find things that go beyond that mediocrity. Go beyond the next B2B ebook. Go beyond the next sales outreach campaign that you've stuck together in 5 minutes. You've got to find a way to stand out and be resonant to your market. And as he articulates really well in the book, playing it safe is the riskiest thing you could do. I'm not going to go into this in more depth. Just dive into that if you want to read into it more. And then we come into the engineering piece of it. So in our go-to-market, to build distribution at the core of what we do, firstly, we have to really deeply understand our market, ideally be the market. Secondly, we've got to make sure that we are courageous in how we execute. And then thirdly, we've got to make sure there are data underpinnings that can really scale. And so we're seeing the rise of the go-to-market engineer, people building, who are data first or infrastructure first, who are AI first in their go-to-market organizations. Or if you're an incumbent in the industry, you've got a team in place, thinking about how you can have a press reset mentality. My old chairman, one of the most valuable things he ever said to us was that every 6 months, you should walk out of the room, walk back in the room, and see the whole organization with fresh eyes, as if you're a consultant from McKinsey's asked to come in and analyze what's going on. Have that press reset mentality. What could you do if your job was to clear the slate and reinvent go-to-market in the organization? And then test, test, test. Right, that was number one. Let's dive on. Number two, this sounds disconcertingly negative, but every subscription that you commence on is going to lead at some point to a churn for some reason or another. And yet, time and time again, I find first-time founders not planning for churn from day zero. And it almost comes as a surprise 3 months later or a year later when the churn event happens. And now it's, oh, we've got to build a whole bunch of customer success and tooling and alerts to go and stop this from ever happening again. But churn is just baked into a subscription business model, right? It's a fact of life. And so you need to plan from it from day zero. And we see some great examples of this because we've got a bunch of retention functionality built into our core platform. Let me give some stats and then talk about how we do this. HubX, about 200 million users of their multiple apps every year. And they used what we call salvage offers or salvage discounts. And I'll explain that in a minute. So that's when someone tries to churn, you just offer them an alternative, perhaps lower cost package or a different type of out that isn't a full churn event. 63% of their users who tried to churn chose a salvage offer, and it saved them $106,000 of MRR in the first 3 months of implementation. We can dive into that example in more, but what's actually happening here is we're asking two specific questions. Pretty simple, not rocket science. The first one is insight. Why are you canceling? And you're trying to make sure that you're too expensive isn't the only option there, or isn't the primary option there, because usually it's about value, or it's about experience, or support, or something else. So first one is for insight for your product team, insight for future churn events on other cohorts. The second one is putting them back in a positive mindset. What did you like? Why did you choose us in the first place? And once you've set up these 2 points of insight, it means that you can then offer them a range of different options. They'll be different in your scenario. It could be a pause for a few months. It could be downgrading them to a lesser plan. It could be a full churn, whatever it might be. And so putting this very small moment of friction, and what we're not doing here is stopping people churning, right? Churn is a fact of life in a subscription business. We're gaining insight from it, and we're seeing who wants to take one of the other options that are available. So very tactical, but think about planning for churn from day zero. This should actually go beyond the churn event. When we looked at our data about a year ago, we saw multiple consecutive months as the markets were starting to bounce back, where MRR growth was being driven by reactivation MRR. So how you treat your customers when they're gone is important. If you're able to, continuing to market to them, thinking about the cadence of that, thinking about the tone of that, thinking about how you'd invite them back into the fold again when they come round and need your service again. Right, and then the data shows, we run this reasonably regularly, and at multiple different brackets of average revenue per user, we always find that running these offboarding offers reduces churn in each of those different segments. You've also got the opportunity to do other really interesting things that come before the churn event when you're planning for churn from day zero, like moving people to a longer plan early in their subscription. I think ChartMogul have got some great data on this in one of their recent studies about how early you can make that. Once there's a few moments of value, how can you move them to an annual plan? Whoop is one of our customers, and I think it's 3 magic moments with the Whoop dashboard before they try and upsell you at a discount to an annual plan, which really drives higher LTV. Cool. So, number 1, number 2, number 3, the world is flat, so think global. One of the great privileges of my role is coming to communities like this. I love being in Zagreb last year. It's a couple of times I've been to Croatia to different meetups. In the last few months, we've been to Tokyo and Singapore and Chennai and San Francisco and Austin and New York. I really believe that being with people is helpful for us to build relationship and build trust. But every one of our businesses are born global. Thomas Friedman wrote the seminal book 20 years ago, The World is Flat, and it's flatter than ever. People are building really interesting businesses from around the world, and we all have a global marketplace, and yet so often we choose to sell to a market-by-market expansion basis. We sell to our own market, and then we choose the US, and we try and sell there, and we find it hard, and then we try again, and then once we've done the US, probably that's the end of our company journey. But the world is flat, so think global. A couple of examples. This is reasonably local. Eotha, who are based in Belgrade, I believe. They were experiencing some challenges with the payment service provider they were using that was because of their regional sale, their international sales, seeing lots of cancelled payments, failed payments. Implemented Paddle and instantly were able to localize their checkout, right payment methods, right currencies in every region around the world. And what was interesting here is not only their primary markets, US and UK, saw a revenue uplift, but also markets like Mexico that they never had on their list at all, immediately saw a bump in revenue because now they were localizing correctly in those markets. Fascinating story. We can dive into that over beers if it's more interesting to you. Nexus Mods comes from another place that isn't the Silicon Valley. Nexus Mods are actually based about 10 miles from my house in southwest England, in Devon, in farming land. If any of us are gamers, I'm not. If any of you are gamers in this room, I'm not cool enough. You might well have used Nexus Mods. About 65, 70 million active users every month modding games. And they'd had to pull out of India as a market because they just couldn't deal with the tax issues, the regulatory issues in that market. And then were able to localize, pure localize with Paddle, suddenly opened up 205 territories, including India, and their revenue in China grew by 9 times. Just huge ability to now grow in every region around the world very compliantly. And we're constantly rolling out new payment methods. South Korea's gone really well for us. We launched a South Korea offering recently, and 70% of South Korean buyers are preferring to use those local South Korean payment methods. So just finding a way to show up in the most relevant way to your market around the world is really important. Similar story in China. We also love companies from around the world. If you're a business that's kind of under 10K MRR, we would love you to join our Launchpad. We have a fee-free, equity-free, 6-week program. We've got Ange here, who's so lovely to see you building out of Ljubljana. First thing, when I saw Ange today, she was one of our launch paddlers from cohort 3. She came and gave our team a big hug and said, "You changed our life," which is very, very cool to hear. So we've got another cohort starting now, 70 companies. You just apply, and then we help you with credits and discounts and help you launch your business and try and scale around the world. So come talk to the team or talk to Ange if you want to find out more details about that. 4, we want to move fast to monetize. Now, there are other pricing experts in the room here who've got much more experience than me on Europe pricing models, so I'm going to defer to them, but just a few quick thoughts. Firstly, in our base, some of the biggest growers amongst our customers are companies that are testing regularly with their pricing models. Our data says time after time, businesses that do a pricing or packaging change every 3 months outperform those who don't on an average revenue per account or average revenue per user basis by 103%. Build the muscle of tweaking and changing and experimenting in your packaging and pricing. GeoGuessr, I know we've got some GeoGuessr customers in the room. It's a kind of a geo-based game. They've more than doubled their revenue in the last year based on 2 things, changing their free trial to a freemium model and tweaking their pricing structures. Yes, there's been some more go-to-market in the mix of it too, but a radical outcome in terms of their growth rate. Take Monica, Chinese, South Korean. Some of you might have heard of Manus, which is one of the new kind of base-level LLMs that's being launched, and that's this team, another Paddle customer. Massive reduction in their chargeback rate by changing the way they were approaching their free trial and moving it to a freemium plan, and so massively reduced their chargebacks and enabled them to scale. And we could go through many of these, but there's something more fundamental that's happening here, which is this erosion of SaaS margins. Now, SaaS really makes sense if we have 80% margin. That's what funds all of that upfront go-to-market. These long, high LTV, long cycles, and high margins. And yet, we can see Sam's tweet from earlier this year. We're losing money on OpenAI Pro subscriptions. People use it much more than we expected. And across the board, we're seeing people who launch AI capabilities into a more traditional SaaS business are facing margin erosion. And it's a real thing we've got to be careful of, because 80% becomes 70%, 70% becomes 60%, and your business is then valued on a completely different multiple because you've got this compute cost in your new capabilities that you haven't priced for effectively, and therefore power users are sucking up all of that cost. So you've got to be very careful around this. We've seen this massive explosion in pricing models. This is from my good friend Kyle, who keeps mapping on his Substack, Growth Unhinged, how people are pricing for these new AI capabilities. But broadly, what we're seeing is this shift from seat-based pricing, which, let's face it, in a world where agents are automating many people in organizations, pricing by seat is not a value-creating strategy as we go forwards, because companies are not going to grow by hiring more people. Moving from seat-based strategies to hybrid, to usage-based, to outcome-based. Intercom's actually a customer of ours on the pricing side. We help them launch their FinAI, their resolution model, where they price for the resolution of a customer support ticket. It's fully outcome-based. If the AI resolves it, you pay a fee. Really interesting. But this is the question that we're getting asked lots of times, which is, should we charge for this new AI capability? Because when we look in our data, those that charge directly, they monetize directly the new thing they've built as part of their value stack, they they correlate with outlying growth. And those that don't charge directly, they just wrap it into their bundle, they're very much in the average or in one of the lower quartiles. So we believe you need to find a way to monetize directly with the new things you're building alongside your entire value stack. So if you've got a charge, you've got to think, is it a price rise? Is it an add-on? Is it a usage cap? Is it a new pricing model? Is it a new product entirely? This becomes really complicated. So the way we think about this is the classic 2x2. The vertical axis is willingness to pay. The horizontal axis is adoption of that AI feature. And broadly, if there is a high willingness to pay and a high adoption, then you should be charging this directly with a price rise or some form of new product launch. If there's low willingness to pay but high adoption, and this is what erodes your SaaS margins, then you need to be thinking about usage-based or outcome-based or putting usage caps into your current plan. So it's a $9.99, $29.99, or $59.99, but on every one of those, there's a cap at the amount of usage people use before they get bumped up to the next plan. Think about this really carefully, because that's how you conserve margin whilst also allowing everyone to get the benefit of it who uses it. And then, of course, if you've got a high willingness to pay from a small number of users, that's perfect for an add-on. You want to split that out of your normal good, better, best, or whatever packaging you have and charge for it separately. You should not impose that fee on everybody, because it's only a small number of your base that are getting the value. Cool, but more importantly is deciding what you're optimizing for. And this is where I think a lot of people are getting lost right now. Are you optimizing for acquisition? In which case you're willing to suffer margin, because this is all about growth, 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 getting users on board, showing value. Or are you optimizing for brand positioning? I think Notion was a great example of this. They have a flat fee per user for Notion, and then there's Notion AI that's an extra $9.99 a month, or whatever the price is right now. So it's a very clear brand play that they now have AI that you can upgrade to. It's very clearly articulated. Or revenue growth, or margin protection. If all you need to do is make sure you're protecting your margin, then usage-based or outcome-based becomes really important, even if it means you lose some deals because of the variability in your pricing model. I'll bring us home very quickly now. Marry the mission and date the model. Another thing that we are finding lots of interest across our customer base is B2B businesses desperate to launch a self-serve offering for individuals, and businesses that have traditionally been B2C launching a business plan for their teams that they're serving. So marry the mission, what you're trying to do, date the model. On the enterprise side, we serve customers like ServiceNow, who have an individual training offering, which you buy on an individual seat basis, and they use Paddle for it. On the self-serve side, a great example would be our customer GoodNotes. So they moved multi-platform, not just iOS, but also then onto web and desktop, and they use Paddle for all their web processing, all their web payments. But they also launched GoodNotes for Business, which was a different plan, different pricing structure, and therefore they wanted to make sure they would do a different way of marketing it. So we had, probably in the last week, 3 or 4 very significant companies reach out who want to move one of those models, either go down market or up market. SAM, serviceable addressable market. We could talk about this for an entire hour on its own. I strongly believe that businesses should focus intimately, they should focus to the point where it feels awkward, it feels narrow and constrained, but have a strong expansion thesis about where you go next. We're experiencing this right now at Paddle. We constrain our SAM, our serviceable addressable market. We've got a massive TAM, total addressable market, but we constrain our SAM to pure software companies that are operating probably between 0, but really $1 million and $10 million ARR is our real sweet spot at the moment, although we serve much bigger businesses as well, who are selling across multiple geographies. We've got a very fixed way of looking at that narrow, highly likely to buy customer. But we always know there are other pools of markets that we could go after. And right now, one of the reasons I'm constantly on my laptop rather than engaging for every moment, which I apologize for, is that there was a big ruling in the App Store just on Thursday. And suddenly, $160 billion of App Store processing, because of a court ruling in the US, is now available for other payment providers to process. And there's going to be criminal proceedings if they don't open that up very quickly, which they're now doing. And so suddenly we've got apps coming to us, consumer apps, B2B apps, who have traditionally done most of their processing via the App Store, who now are desperate to make sure they can look at a wider audience, have better retention metrics, make sure they have more complex billing models, and save the 30% Apple fee by coming to a Paddle and doing all of that for them. Now, that's fascinating. We've been preparing for it, but now it's go time, and we've got to go and address that market. We had a SAM expansion thesis, and now it's real, and we've got to shift our resources and adjust our resources to make sure we can go take advantage of that. If you know any app developers, come and introduce them to us afterwards. We're running a bunch of programs right now to help save them 20% on their margin, so we'd love to chat to them. And very finally, I will bring us home. Founder focus is something that was always close to my heart as we went through the 10 long years of slogging, building IDEO through multiple rounds of financing until we sold it into what became Optimizely. And as business leaders, we've got to decide where we place our focus. One thing that I find really interesting about the market we're currently in is how much of our businesses we are able to outsource, how much of our businesses we're able to give over. Yes, it might well be deal or remote for your international hiring. For all of us, it will be AWS or Google Cloud for a bunch of our infrastructure. None of us go to Best Buy anymore to buy server racks. That's what we would have had to have done 20, 30 years ago. We're also seeing it across other spaces as well, particularly in the AI realm. Most of the customers that we're serving are some form of customer experience wrapper around some of the core models. So a huge portion of their business, that's why some of these businesses can be so efficient, because a huge portion of their business is being done by someone else. And that's obviously what we're doing as well. We're constantly helping businesses that are building a do-it-yourself payment stack, which starts off with payments and then very quickly becomes all of these things that no founder woke up wanting to build, right? And we see this, people trying it thousands of times across thousands of different businesses. And there's this very clear, we believe, very clear decision in the market of, do you want to do more, a merchant of record that does all of that in one go, or do you want to DIY, right? And so we're trying to make sure that the gift we're giving in the conversations we have and the customers we serve is giving that gift of founder focus and founder time back by removing a whole bunch of the back office stuff that none of us want to be doing. Cool. Havalavam. I hope that's been useful on one or two of those points. Our team would love to dive in more detail. I know Katie has brought a whole bunch of paddle swag and socks to make sure that you're well equipped on your way home. We really appreciate being here with you. We'd love to chat for the rest of the day. Any of these things have been interesting, I will dive deep with you afterwards. We'd love to get under the skin of your specific circumstance. And we really appreciate the invite to come here, so thank you so much.